This episode of Capes and Lunatics is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. Get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
This is Luca Perich, and you're listening to the Capes and Lunatics podcast.
Hey everyone, we're back with another big Capes and Lunatics episode. Talking about a really big one this time. We're going to talk about Superman Red Son, the animated movie. And it's really big because we have one of the co-writers, Mr. J.M. Dematteis. You probably know him from a ton of Marvel and DC, and now he has his own things going on. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. How are you doing, Mr. Dematteis?
I am doing great. How are you guys doing? All things considered.
Locked down tight, but still breathing.
Yeah, that's that's good that you can say that. That's a good thing.
Oh yeah,
especially the breathing part.
All right, so like I said, I watched the movie last night. I really enjoyed it. I did. Oh, Lilith, you there?
Yeah.
All right. We just started. So my big question. I've been wanting to ask this for a while since we set this up. With adapting a already existing work into like an animated movie, do you find it easier or harder, or is it like a combination of the two? Because it's like the roadmap is already there, but it's like you want to put your own. You have to make it original. You have to, your own original spin on it. You have to adapt it to a different medium.
Yeah, it's really all those things. The good news is obviously you're not starting from nothing.
Yes.
So, and in this case, we're starting from like a really great story. The great thing about the comic is that it's one of those stories where you give them one line, Soviet Superman, and everyone goes, oh, they're instantly reacting. So, and the graphic novel is just filled with incidents and ideas and creativity. It's so stuffed with imagination. Like every page, there's incredible stuff going on in that story. So the blessing is that you're not starting with a blank page. The curse is you have to take that giant stuffed story and turn it into a very streamlined, 80 or 85 minute movie. I explained it to somebody as if you've got a giant redwood tree, and you got to take that redwood tree and you have to carve it down into a 6-foot statue of Superman. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to get carved away, and as you begin to carve at it, you realize that necessarily what works within the context of a graphic novel won't necessarily work within the context of an animated movie. No adaptation is ever going to be literal. It just doesn't work. If you want it to be literal, then you need a motion comic or an audiobook or something. So I think what a good adaptation does, and I've certainly seen it as an audience when I see something adapted based on a book that I've loved, is that you capture the spirit of the thing. The letter of the thing is important up to a point, but it's really the spirit of the thing. So that even if you twist it and bend it and change it, you know that you're getting the essence of what the creator of the original work was trying to communicate. And then you hope that you add to it. Because, if people are if they're a fan of the comic and then they're going to go see the movie, you want them to get something else out of it, not just a literal translation, or else stay home and read the comic. So it's moving around on screen. You want it to have its own life and its own personality. And I think, and I hope that that's what we did with this. I think we honored the source material, but we also made something that was very much its own at the same time. And hopefully, which is what I see sometimes with adaptations, that between the source material and the adaptation, they kind of come together to create almost a third entity. Do you know what I mean? You put them together in your brain and they kind of blend. I've seen that with certain movies based on books that I've liked. I'm like, wow, if I put the book and the movie together, I've got a whole other thing here that somehow transcends both of them. And you kind of hope for that in the end.
And it's been a few years since the original story came out, so
Right.
I think you modernized it. I mean, did you take certain things maybe from the real world, inspirations from the real world maybe for this?
Oh
also?
yeah, there are little touches here and there where you can see that we're reacting to what's happening right now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, not all men. Which is one of my favorite lines in there when Superman does try to use that line on Wonder Woman. Which actually opens up a very interesting. See, when the first time I read Red Son, and this was a long time ago, I felt that Superman comes off as much more sympathetic in the original book.
Interesting.
I really feel that, and it's not to say that you don't make a sympathetic Superman and you don't make a Superman that is, twisted by the own dark world he's born into. Which between this and Speeding Bullets, definitely is something that I think you're very good at. Looking at the darkness that can come from a Superman in a darker world, in a world without Ma and Pa Kent, as it were. Okay, you can talk a little bit later, buddy. And although, I really felt that we get much more of the darkness in Superman in this, in the frustration and anger he feels that he's not winning the argument, or that not everyone agrees with his argument because he's right. That just because he sees the world the way it should be doesn't ring true for everyone.
Right. One of the things. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Please.
One of the things that I think is interesting is that depending on how you look at the story, Superman is the hero of the story, or Luthor is the hero of the story, or Superman is the villain of the story, or Luthor is the villain of the story. They're both, they both do things that are morally questionable, and yet I think the thing about the Superman is he is fighting for his Soviet version of truth, justice, and the American way. One of the things early in the story, without giving too much away, when he discovers, and this I think this is something that we brought in the adaptation, when he discovers the truth behind Stalin's beautiful communist vision and what's really going on with the gulags, he's completely demolished by that because he really has a very pure idealistic vision of what this could be. He really wants a world in his head where everything is fair and everyone is taken care of. And, and that's always the problem. And I don't remember whether I think it's even addressed in dialogue. I get mixed up sometimes between other stories I've written with similar themes, where it's like, can you impose order from without, or does that have to be something that comes from within people,
Yes.
No matter how pure your ideals and how good your intentions, And so that was the fun thing with him. And I maybe it got a little darker because I think we addressed the underbelly of the Soviet Union a little more directly than they did in the graphic novel.
Yeah.
It was really important to put in those scenes with the gulags because that's what was going on. We created obviously our own version of that.
Yeah.
So that when he returns back to Stalin, it's a very different thing that happens than happens in the original version. And you can understand why he responded that way.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate where we see the process, and we see, and for what it's worth, it gives him a much more human continence, or countenance. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
As long as it's not incontinent, we're fine.
Yes, where he is making the hard choices, and when we see the entire thing with and I don't know how spoiler we agreed to get to on this.
Go ahead.
Okay. When we
Mildly spoilery.
Okay, yeah. So warning, spoilers. And actually it is in the books as well.
It's in the books. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, when we get to the overriding of people's free will who were dissenters, it creates just this reality that, you know, in this context, it's, well, I'm not as bad as Stalin was, but still we can see where the problem is.
Right.
One of the other changes you make in this is, of course, we make a Batman who is, as I was talking to my son about this, who, by the way, he loves your Batman in this.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, where he's a bit more Jokerish, where he is an element of chaos.
Yeah, very much so. He wants to bring the system down, and he'll do it any way he can.
Exactly, and I really like that, although it's dark to watch and difficult to watch. But then when we compare it to that idea of that complete loss of free will, it, you know, you start to understand where everyone's coming from in this much more difficult way, you know.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's a very beautifully told tale in this. And what I think, and for the record, you do address it in dialogue in the film. And again, one of the things I really appreciate is the idea at the end when you know the Soviet Union is falling, and it comes to this idea of, and actually it's before this, before the total end, but the idea that rule by one man, you know, can't be a utopia. Even if everyone is cared for, you know, a benevolent king, no matter how benevolent he is still a king, and your rights are still only limited by what the king allows. And that, I think, is, you know, in our modern political dialogue, there's a lot of discussion of, you know, democratic socialism versus democratic capitalism. And I think what the central point is that so long as you have that democratic voice, that is what keeps it, even though having that democratic voice is chaotic and difficult and can lead to problematic moments in history, the democratic voice is what sets us right, not the imposition of someone else's will above that democracy. And I think, like I said, in these very strange political times we live in, it's a really interesting message, and, you know, maybe even a kind of, you know, shocking message to a lot of people who maybe are getting more and more into the idea that, well, maybe democracy is the problem. And I think addressing it as, no, actually, democracy will always be the solution.
Right. Well, when you look at what's going on around the world, you know, let's go to pre-coronavirus world, you know, where there is authoritarianism on the upswing all over the world, and it's a scary thing. And, you know, not that any of us were consciously thinking about it, at least I wasn't when we were writing the story, because once you get into the story, you're just following the story and the characters. And then, you know, the themes sort of emerge as you go along. But I'm always much more following it from the characters out than from the plot in. But what you're saying is absolutely right, and that is what the story is about in a lot of ways. And that's Superman's journey. When he gets to the end and he realizes that, you know, no matter how noble his intentions, and he has made the world a better place. That's the weird thing. In a lot of ways, he really has. You know, poverty, hunger, all these things have been reduced. In some ways, people's lives are better. Well, so some of them have implants in their brains, so they'll behave. But, you know, but people aren't hungry anymore, you know. And there's all these trade-offs, and he has to come to the realization that, you know, just as what you're saying, as messy as it is, people have to chart their own destiny.
And along those lines, he made Luthor a better person, arguably.
Yes.
He's still the driven megalomaniac he is, but at the same time, now, because he wants to win the argument too, in that sense of these two Supermen facing off against each other, it is about winning the argument more than just, you know, defeating the guy. It's, no, I need to win the argument. And it's brilliant that, you know, after he's won the argument, he's done, and he walks away.
And I think
it's like, yeah.
And I think, speaking of Luthor, I think you wrote a more sympathetic Luthor than actually was in the actual comic. You know, in the comic, he's just like, oh, Lois, we have to put our marriage on hiatus. I have to solve this. I have to beat this guy. I mean, again, he's, you know, he forgets her half the time in the movie, but he just seems more like, oh, I'm sorry, dear. You know, I love you. You know, he seems more sympathetic here.
Right. There's the scene, which we won't get into the details with Superior Man,
Yes.
where he and she gets really, really, really upset with him, and you see that it matters to him what she thinks.
Mm-hmm.
It really matters. But what you're saying is really true about. He's not thinking about democracy either. He's thinking about just what you're saying. This guy's a challenge. It's a chess game to him, and he wants to win. And if in the end we have a more democratic world, well, that's the icing on the cake to him. He wants to play a game with this alien Superman and win. That's really what it's about for him. And maybe Lois is sort of his Jiminy Cricket in a way. She's his conscience, and she keeps him a little more tethered in humanity.
Yeah. And again, that is one of the things that I think it really communicates in this. And we have a very different ending from what we get in the book, and I think in many ways it's an improvement, because when you try to go too far out in any story, it's either too little information or too much information, and it can take away from the greaterness of the story. And having it end where it does with, arguably ostensibly a happy ending, but at the same time, is any ending truly happy?
Right.
Call no man happy who is not dead, as they say.
Orson Welles said, happy ending depends on where you stop your story,
Exactly. Exactly.
But, the difference, I think the ending in the comic is fantastic, but I think at the end of this streamlined movie, it would have been just too much, and I think that's why we decided to not include that. It would have thrown the balance off of what we did. It works really, really well, and it's a really wonderful concept, which I don't want to give away in case anyone hasn't read it. That Mark does at the end of the comic. And when I say we, I have to really underscore that this story. I worked with Bruce Timm and Jim Krieg, who were the producers on this. And we would get on the phone for hours and peel this story apart and put it back together. And I'd go off and write. Then they'd see my draft, and we'd get on the phone for hours. So it was the three of us putting this story together. And then, of course, Sam, the director, just takes it and brings it to beautiful visual life, adding wonderful little touches through the animation. So the whole thing is a group effort. It's really a group effort. So I cannot take all the credit, nor could I take all the blame if you didn't like it. It's all of us together.
Lilith, do you have anything?
No, you boys are doing good. Don't worry about it.
I feel bad.
It is just a great film. Now, as I said, you also wrote Speeding Bullets.
Yes.
Which is, again, a very interesting take on Superman, taking Superman in your own way. It's a different Superman in a different universe, and how the things he witnesses, the darkness he experiences, kind of alters his direction as a hero. And it mirrors the Batman story. And I won't get into the details there, but of course it also mirrors the Superman story and makes a brilliant blending of the two, I think. It is interesting how in those moments of darkness that it does leave you with that, as the saying goes, for the want of a nail, the entire story changes and we get something different. But then again, of course, Superman does fight his way back in the end to that idea of truth, justice, and peace for all mankind in his own way.
Right, and I think that's the thing about these stories and these I quote iconic characters. I know it's an overused word, but with Superman, I think it's appropriate. You can bend them and twist them in all sorts of ways, but there is a fundamental something about Superman, even in Red Sun. By the end, even his misdeeds in Red Sun are coming from that fundamental Superman place of wanting to make life better for people. And by the end, what he comes to, you could argue that by the end he might go off and be the Superman that we know in some way. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's doing it quietly behind the scenes now. And the same thing with Speeding Bullets. It's like, all this stuff is it's sort of like all of us. I think we all come into life with a basic nature, and our childhoods, our dysfunction, our pain, the traumas that we go through can layer on top of that nature. But I think if you're lucky enough to peel that away in your life, the fundamental nature will always shine through. Some people get so twisted by life's events and life's traumas that maybe that fundamental nature gets lost forever. But I think for most of us, we can find a way to get back to that fundamental nature of who we are. And I think that's certainly true for Superman. I think it's, so I was talking about the fact that someone asked me about, did you ever do any other Elseworld stories? And I pitched a couple right after I did Red Sun, one of which was sort of a reverse, where Bruce Wayne is kidnapped by an alien probe and brought to Krypton, in that sort of, remember that cold vision of Krypton in the John Byrne era? And he's raised by this completely heartless Jor-El, and he grows up to hate the system. So he calls himself Superman to mock them, and basically becomes an agent of chaos to bring down the Kryptonian hierarchy. That was one of them. But the other one was, and I understand why they didn't go for this one, but the idea was the rocket lands and it gets found by this white supremacist family. So he's essentially raised to be like a super Klansman, right? But the whole journey would be, they twist him so much, but of course there's a fundamental nature in there of Superman, and there's always got to be the lowest there, or somebody that brings that out in him, so that in the end he brings down the very people that raised him and becomes the Superman that we know. So no matter how far you twist him, even to that extreme, I believe that he will always be Superman in the end. You'd have to twist him so far and so long for that to be lost. And really, as a culture, we don't want that to ever be lost.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Honestly, that's a perfect time to repitch that story.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would love to see you right out of that hole, quite frankly, because that does sound like a really deep hole to dig out of. But I would imagine you could do it and do it quite well.
Well, you hear these amazing stories about people that were brought up that way, and then something happens. And someone reaches out to them with an act of compassion, and they suddenly begin to see the world in a different way, and they leave that life behind, And I'm always touched and amazed by stories like that. There's a story I heard years ago, and the guy was a neo-Nazi, and this neo-Nazi group was harassing this one rabbi for whatever reason. I don't remember the details. And then this guy, he has some terrible accident, and he's like in a wheelchair, and his friends abandon him. And the guy that comes along to take care of him is the rabbi that he was harassing, and brings him into his home, and this totally transforms this guy's life and his view of humanity and who we are. So that kind of journey is it's amazing, obviously, in life, and we want to reflect that in fiction, because I believe in the redemption journey for all of us. I really do. So it would be a challenge to tell that story, and I think one of the reasons DC didn't want to do it, and it makes perfect sense, is what's your cover image? That's not a good image. That's not a good image at all. A guy maybe in a Klan suit with an S sprayed on his chest. So maybe no matter. Maybe it would work more in a novel where you don't have the visuals that people can pull out and do things with. But so I understood that rejection. The Batman story, I never quite got why they rejected that one, because I think that would be the Superman on Krypton thing. I think that would be a really cool story. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked.
What was Superman? In any Superman story, is that like the beginning of it all? It's like you have to figure out how much comes from what he was taught, who raised him, and then it's like he has to have at least a little bit of innate goodness in him, and you have to find like the right mix.
Yeah, I think so. Because I don't think a Superman story would work where he lost that innate goodness. Where he's just super evil. I don't. Maybe that's just me. Someone else might make that work. That's not the Superman story I want to tell, or particularly want to read, where he could be ultimately corrupted.
Yeah. So no Crime Syndicate of America stories.
Right. Those work fine because we still have our Superman in our dimension. So it's okay to play off against each other.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, and I was trying to look into it. Have you ever done any what ifs for Marvel?
I never did any what ifs. Never did. I thought about that recently. That for some reason I never worked on that book. It's funny because I just it was supposed to come out this month, but because of everything with Diamond and everything, it shifted. But I just did a Star Trek story for IDW, which is they're doing a whole series of Mirror Universe stories, and I did the original series Mirror Universe story, which is a retelling of the original Space Seed Khan story.
Ooh.
And I realized working on it, Mirror Universe, it's an Elseworlds, really, is what it is, because you get to play with the iconic characters that but you put them in a different context, and you bend them and you
give them a goatee.
Exactly, right. Give them a goatee and wait see if you can make their essential nature come out in some way. So I had a great time working on that story, and I have no idea really. I think it might be coming out in May. We hope. It all depends on where the world is by May, I guess. But I realize that's an Elseworld. Those mirror universe stories are Elseworld stories essentially, and what if stories.
The reason why that jumped out at me, among everything else in the conversation, is when I'm watching Red Sun, it really strikes me how much Lex Luthor is a Reed Richards character in this. In the fact that he does seem very stuck in his own mind, stuck by the challenge facing him, and but at the same time, and now granted, I don't think Reed Richards would create a superior man to go and die.
Thor clone.
But at the same time, I can't necessarily write it out of the situation either. Because again, from his perspective, it's like, no, it wasn't a human. It was never really sentient. It was a construct I made, and it's responding to stimuli. It's not really, it's like in a lot of stories we're reading right now with AIs, sort of just being seen as disposable people, and going into the Star Trek universe, what they sort of, if you're looking at Picard, Nick, what the AIs became in Star Trek before they got rid of them. Spoilers for Picard. Just seeing this idea of disposable people. And what would you do if you had beings that didn't mind being disposable?
Right. Are the justifications that anyone makes, whether it's the justifications we make in our everyday lives or the justifications science makes? Well, I'm going to make an atomic bomb because we need to end this war. And yes, it'll be the most devastating weapon in the history of humankind, but I have my reasons why we need to drop this bomb. It's the same thing. How far do the justifications go? And that's an eternal human issue.
Charlie brought up the what ifs. I was just thinking, I love your classic run on Captain America. I would love to talk to you about that someday in depth. But
sure.
Do you think would a story like this work with Steve Rogers? Like a what if? Would you be interested in that?
So meaning like a Red Sunish kind of story?
Yeah, kind of like, Steve Rogers, in World War II.
Well, there are a lot of similarities, between those two guys. Because I look at, Steve Rogers certainly as the truly good, decent, that's his nature. Yeah. He's a good and decent and compassionate man. And so if you took that good, decent, compassionate man and he was a Soviet super soldier, it might be a very similar story, with but then why do it? Because it's essentially redoing Red Sun. But there, if there's a parallel, I think in the Marvel universe to Superman, it's certainly Steve Rogers. In terms of this, they would be. I think they would be really good friends, or maybe they'd be so much alike they just annoy the hell out of each other.
Yes, well, the whole superpower differential would always be an issue, kind of like I think it is for Batman and Superman.
Well, I could see the difference.
I guess Cap in a way is kind of a mixture of the two, because Cap is the guy who isn't that superpowered and yet somehow has the ability to kick ass everywhere he goes, no matter how strong his opponent is, just like Batman. So I guess Cap is the ultimate fusion of Superman and Batman in some ways, without Batman's darkness.
I think that would be the big difference in the Steve Rogers Red Sun story, is like people would underestimate him because he isn't a superpower. He isn't this big god level power.
Yeah.
Right.
All I gotta do is have Erskine defect to the Soviet Union instead of the United States, and there you go.
Right. That's right.
And it's the Red Guardian story,
That's right.
And, which would be interesting as well. But there's a lot of great stories to tell in these, and definitely appreciate the work you've done on this. It
was a fun and challenging project because the source material was so rich. If you really look through that book, you can really, on every page, there's like interesting concepts that almost, in some ways, it reminds me of like reading, Jack Kirby stories when he's writing his own stuff, and Kirby would have some mind-blowing concept on, page 2, and then page 3 on to the next mind-blowing concept, And so this Red Sun is filled with these wonderful ideas, and so the challenge was, what do we use? What do we not use? What do we leave out? What do we streamline? Because it's such rich source material that Mark gave us to work with.
Okay. Let me ask you this, because this is something I was trying to go back and rewatch the scenes to see if I could see a clue for this. Did Lex Luthor send Brainiac to the Soviet Union, or is the Brainiac just going to the Soviet Union because that's where Superman is?
No, Lex sent him.
Lex did send him. So, okay. So I couldn't quite figure that out. And it definitely it's set up to look like that. That's certainly what happens in the book, but I wasn't quite certain of that.
Right, because I even think he says something to Lois at the end about, or to someone that he was, it doesn't matter that we don't want what happens to Superior Man happens, because he's using him just to test Superman's limits and things like that. So he wanted that confrontation.
Well, yeah. And I understood that. That part I understood. It was just whether or not that particular scene
I see. Mm-hmm.
Was, because not for nothing, aliens are still going to be invading,
Right.
It's not like, it's always one of those things I think that sometimes gets overlooked whenever you're trying to tell a different story is that, there's still a whole cosmos out there with aliens and dark sides and all these beings that are going to be attacking the Earth at some point or another. Although arguably maybe with Superman and people being more focused on Superman, maybe going out into space wasn't as big of a deal for humans, so we don't draw as much attention to ourselves.
Wait, so were you talking about Superior Man or Brainiac? Because he said
Brainiac.
Superior Man. Oh,
I
think you said Superior Man. That's also, I just gave you the answer to the wrong question.
Yes, I would use Brainiac, the great Brainiac.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting question. I think that's one of those questions that don't need an answer, that you can come up with your own answer, because you can tilt your head one way and look at the story and say that Brainiac is just something that just popped in. And the other is that he was in, Lex was somehow manipulating that as well. Right. Yeah. So that now it makes more sense, because I was answering about Superior Man. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's pretty explicit that yes.
That's why I was a little baffled by the question. So it's okay.
That's okay. I don't always say the right words.
You can cut this whole sequence out, right?
Yeah. We'll make you sound much better, and we'll make you sound much worse. I promise.
Okay.
But I also like your take is I mean both are good, but in the comic it seems like a lot of it is just like other people's perspective of Superman. Here it's like more of like the first person. You're like from Superman's point of view.
Yeah, you're in it more directly with him, perhaps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I did like that.
Yes. Definitely, I think making Superman be the proactive seizer of power in the Soviet Union helps the story as well. It just it makes it, it explains all of his other actions as it goes forward, and I think that is what is necessary for this story, especially, as you say, telling it in an abbreviated timeline. One of the things I always feel about adaptations is that you have to, and you said it yourself, you're keeping true to the spirit, but you also have to tell the story in a new way so that it's not just, the exact beats of the comic, because then there's no surprise. And, leaving Brainiac open to interpretation certainly is that kind of question that will leave nerds debating it for years to come.
And it's not like you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm going to make this different just to make it different. It's just you follow the story. And that's the joy of writing for me in general. Once you're into the story, you're not dictating to the story. The story is dictating to you. The characters are leading you on. The plot is leading you on. And then it leads you to surprising places. And the favorite thing that happens for me as a writer is when my own story rears up and surprises me. When I'm writing and I go, I didn't know that. I didn't expect that to happen. And that's the beauty of the journey with the story. It really does take on a life of its own and delights and surprises me. And with that moment when you go, I can't believe that happened. I didn't expect that. So I'm thinking if I didn't expect it, then I know the readers aren't going to expect it, which is always a great moment.
Now, here's a question for you. Now, you among the many iconic characters you worked on over the years, one is, of course, Conan, who is his own version of a Superman, kind of a Captain America, Batman kind of character in his own light as well. Now that he's back at Marvel, now that he's being integrated into the modern Marvel universe, do you have any thoughts or ideas of what you might want to see happen with Conan?
It's interesting. The Conan thing is really interesting for me because that was my first regular gig at Marvel. And go back in time to that period, Roy Thomas had been the only person writing Conan for 10 years. And here I am, brand new, still really learning my craft. And they're like, here you're going to replace Roy Thomas on Conan. It may have been the single most intimidating gig of my entire career. And, when I look back and I can see all the warts and flaws, they're collecting. Actually, it's coming out in a big omnibus a few months down the line, my entire run on Conan. And I loved Conan, especially the when Barry Smith was on the book, but I loved it all. But the Smith Thomas Conan, whew, that was just phenomenal stuff. And of course, I read all the REH stuff and loved it when I was a teenager and a young adult. But it was really intimidating. It was really. I remember the first issue. I was sitting there like trying to channel Roy Thomas and his style, and I finally had to kind of relax. It took a few issues to relax into it and feel a little bit more like myself. And so I've sometimes wondered if I could go back now and approach that character again with the skill that I've developed over the ensuing decades and see what I don't have a clear image in my mind of what I would do. But it would be an interesting thing. One of the things I love about Conan is not so much I'm a barbarian with a sword who's going to lop your head off, but it's the mystery of that world, the magic of that world. You really feel like you're walking through another time, another dimension. Through his prose, Howard really created that, and I always said that I think in a lot of ways John Buscema drew the better Conan, and Thomas created the better Hyborian Age. You know what I mean? The world, Conan's world, was brought to this just magical, mystical life. I would love to have seen John Buscema's Conan walking through Barry Smith's world. It would have been a really interesting thing. But that's the part that always really engaged me more than anything. Although, when you're a teenager, there's a lot to be said with, kicking in doors and lopping off heads and stuff. It helps the hormones while they're popping, But it's really it's Conan's world and that magic and that mystery. And that's why, story like Tower of the Elephant, I just have always loved that story. Because of the magic and the mystery. Frost Giant's daughter, that's not about the violence. It's about the magic of it. And that'd be, now that I'm thinking about it, now that we're all locked down, it'd be fun to go. I haven't read those stories in years. Not my stories. I mean, the actual Howard stories. Yeah. I've reread the comics over the years. To go back and reread Howard's stuff, that would be great. So it would be interesting, I think, and to do something very poetic and very magical, and yet still true to the character, and do it now. Yeah, it would be kind of fun, I think.
Yeah, well, and so based on that, I think you it seems like you'd rather write him in the Hyborian Age than, because right now we have the two, we actually, as maybe but they have the entire expanded Hyborian Age universe that Marvel is creating.
I guess I don't know. I'm not really up on it, so tell me what's going on.
Oh yeah. So big Conan fan. So yeah. So we do have an entire Hyborian Age universe with like two other characters at least who are also in Conan's universe, but not Conan. Balit and Valeria. And then you also have Conan currently time displaced into the modern Marvel Comics universe. And then you also have a bunch of other Howard characters running around the Marvel universe now as well. Apparently
in the contemporary Marvel universe?
Sort of creating much in the same way that back in the day the Hyborian Age was part of the Marvel Comics canonical history. Now the entire Howard canon is in Marvel history. So Disney and Marvel is very much double downing on the rights they have currently acquired with Conan, which
but makes Conan is also a character in the modern Marvel universe now.
Yes, and in the original Hyborian Age. So he's got he's got 2 books in the Hyborian Age, and I think currently, if you count the spinoff of the Serpent Crown saga that he's currently running through, which of course is also on hiatus right now, he's in that and Savage Avengers. So yeah, he's got multiple stories going on in the modern Marvel universe, classic Conan in the Hyborian Age, and then other Hyborian Age characters, and then other Howard characters whose names are jumping out of my head right now, but I'm forgetting.
Are they using Cull and Solomon Kane and all those guys?
Yeah, Solomon Kane and there was a female character as well, and I'm blanking on her name. But yes, but Solomon Kane, they just had him in a whole crossover storyline with Moon Knight. So Solomon Kane and Moon Knight.
I can't wrap my head around.
Yes.
Hey, this man here wrote a Moon Knight arc.
Yes. So that
So I'm the guy that when I wrote Marvel Team Up, I had a Spider-Man King Cull team up. So I can't, you know what I mean? I can't look askance at what I'm doing.
Well, honestly, I like that, and I like that entire idea of, you know, there were several what ifs with
Right.
you know, Conan in the modern age, you know, one where he goes back almost immediately and one where he's kind of stuck in the modern age and fights Captain America. And that one actually happens to be one of my favorite what ifs. So
Conan versus Captain America. I don't remember that story. That's funny.
yeah, it was really good. It was really good. Sort of the Captain America even gives a nice speech at the end about, you know, in a world without freedom and justice, might that not be the shape of a hero? So,
not that you remember it or anything.
it's a little ingrained in my head. So yeah, sorry, big Conan fan. That was like one of the first comics that I got as a kid in subscription form. So,
and did that lead you to the Howard stories? Did you go then and read all the original stuff?
I'll be honest with you. No, I have not.
You haven't read the original Howard.
I haven't read the original Howard stuff. I honestly, for a long time in my youth, I wasn't even aware that Conan existed outside of movies and comic books.
You know, what's interesting? Wow. Well, you should try it. Go get a collection of Howard stuff and really see where this came from. You know, because we're talking about adaptations and source material, right? Go back to the source material. Really interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff. You know what? Since I was around, I was a teenager when the original Conan book came out. So what I think a lot of people that may be reading Conan now don't realize was how different that book was when it first appeared. It's funny that we're down a whole Conan road here, but that's fine. In that, you know, the whole 60s was about the superhero revolution and the Marvel superheroes. So suddenly this book comes along, you know, with this, and the first ads with this guy in this helmet with horns in it and in like a loincloth and a sword, you know, what is this? There had not, you know, in my experience, I had never seen anything like it. And it made my 16-year-old brain explode, you know, and I read the comics and I had to run out and buy the paperbacks, and I completely got lost really deeply in Conan land for quite a while when I was a teenager. I still remember a friend of mine, I turned him on to the Conan stuff, and he showed up at my house one day, I guess in a very Conan kind of mood, and instead of knocking on the door, he kicks the door really, really hard. But he didn't realize my father was home, and my father opened the door with his eyes on fire, you know. It's like, poor guy's trying to be Conan, and then he suddenly shrank into a little ball, you know. But yeah, those comics were like revolutionary in their day when they first came out, because there had never been anything like that. And then you watch Barry Smith evolve as an artist, and there had never been art like that in a comic book. You know, it was just extraordinary.
Well, I will definitely be picking up the Howard books after this interview. I've got time, so
yeah. It's one thing we all have right now is a little bit of time here.
That's probably the one bright side. People can discover new things like, you know, literature, comics, whatever.
Yeah. It is, on the one hand, you know, there's all this horrible stuff going on. On the other hand, it is allowing us to slow down a little bit. It's allowing us to see what's important and not important in our lives. And I hope it's expanding people's hearts a little bit too, you know, and it's letting the environment breathe. And I wanted to go look this up to see about just global acts of violence. You know, there has to be a more peaceful world right now. It just has to be, because so many countries are locked down. So it's a fascinating contrast, you know, of what's going on right now. It's the stories that are going to come out of this when this is all over is going to be really interesting.
I thought I heard somewhere they said the death rate in Chicago had actually, by violence, had actually gone down.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it has to.
Yeah.
It has to. It's really interesting. And I'm thinking about like war zones and things. You know, it's really is like the Earth is saying, "Hey guys, back off." You know, reevaluate your priorities here a little bit. You know, it's a strange and interesting times we're living in.
All right, since we're off the beaten path here, you know, the whole mess with the comic industry right now is basically kind of shut down. I read that some comic creators were talking about, you know, what we need to revitalize the whole thing after everything comes back is a new Marvel versus DC or Marvel team up DC crossover, whatever. one, would you be interested in doing anything for that? And two, who would be your dream team up?
Well, I got to do my dream team up twice. I did for Marvel. I did a Spider-Man and Batman,
Yes.
and then DC asked me to do Batman, Spider-Man. So that was to do one of them was phenomenal. To do both of them, one for each company, was just great. And each story had a little bit of a different tone and different artist, and it was just so that almost was the whole dream come true right there. But we're had this conversation just now about Superman and Captain America. That might be kind of a fun, interesting team up, wouldn't it?
Yes.
To do the two of them. Or, I really, really love the supernatural characters. The DC universe especially has just such a deep bench of amazing supernatural characters. I loved writing the Justice League Dark comic. I loved writing Dr. Fate and Spectre. I loved writing the Constantine animated movie. I love that world. So to take, Constantine and Doctor Strange, something like that. Now there's a cool team up. And talk about different personalities that you could contrast. So that would be fun to play, and then to use each of those characters so you can bring in all the different supernatural elements of both universes. That maybe that's the team up I'd want to do more than any other. That would be really fun, really fun.
Oh, nice. I mean, do you think they could actually pull this off? Because I don't know, it just seems like Marvel and DC don't want to play ball these days.
They used to do it all the time, and it was, nobody was, everyone got along, everyone played well. So if they want to do it, they certainly should be able to do it. This idea, since I was always a freelancer, there were even times when I had an exclusive contract with Marvel, but I had a clause in my contract that allowed me to do Vertigo work, creator-owned work for Vertigo. And I basically always went back and forth between both companies. I never understood this Marvel versus DC thing. Maybe that's in the head of some executive somewhere or some fan somewhere. But most of us as freelancers, we're just people that love comics and love the universes of not just both those companies, but anybody that'll give us work for that matter, But, so going back and forth between the two, playing in both universes, that's natural for me. I've always done it. So this idea that, they can never come together and do this because they're rivals, that's nonsense to me. If they want to do it, they could do it. Plus, I think, it would be a sales bonanza if they started doing that stuff again. And after this is over, they're going to need some sales bonanzas, because it's going to be rocky for a little while.
My pitch, which they're always free to steal, I think they should get together to save the Amalgam universe.
Yes.
So you mean three universes?
Three universes, yes.
Wow.
Well, Amalgam was the universe that got created out of their last crossover. So
I see.
Yeah, no.
I think you need Grant Morrison for that one. You need a mind like that, because I think I would get overwhelmed having to crash through all three universes.
Okay.
Lil, if anything?
You boys are doing good. I'm proud of you. Fine.
We're always looking for Lilith's approval. She's very important to us.
All right. Charlie, but if you don't have anything else, I was going to say we can let Mr. Dematteis do his plugs.
Yes. What are you up to, Mr. Dematteis?
Well, I'm working on a couple of comic book projects that I couldn't talk about anyway because they haven't been announced, and B, now because of what's going on, everything's kind of on hold. I did just start work on another animated movie for Warner Brothers, another DC-related animated movie, which I can't tell you about. There's that Star Trek story I mentioned, but that I think maybe will be out in May. It's hard to do plugs right now, and everything is sort of in flux. So I guess the things to plug would be things that are out there right now. Obviously, we've talked about Superman Red Sun. If you want some free entertainment, download the CW Seed app. I did there's a Deathstroke animated series on CW Seed.
Yes.
The first batch of episodes is out. What usually happens with these Seed stories is I write a full-length animated movie. They break it up into these episodes. They put a batch of episodes on Seed, and the first half, and then somewhere down the line they release the full-length movie, which has 20 more minutes than you'll see on Seed. Then they release the rest of the shortened episodes on Seed later on. But you can go on CW Seed right now for free and see it's about 35 minutes worth of Deathstroke. It's another project that really came out really, really well. I'm really happy with. And right now we're all looking for something to watch. So I think people will enjoy that. And then I'll plug a few collected editions. They've been out for a while, but they're important projects to me. I did a series for Karen Berger at Berger Books called The Girl in the Bay. There's a collected edition of that out now. If you're a fan of my Vertigo work, it's a very sort of Vertigo-esque, twisty, supernatural, time travel, identity story. And it was so much fun to work with. Karen and I hadn't worked together in years, and she's one of my dearest friends. So it was really great to work with her again on this project. Then at the other end of the spectrum, I did a project for IDW with my buddy Mike Cavallero called Impossible Incorporated, which is a big sort of Fantastic Four meets Doctor Who meets Doc Savage about this teenage girl genius going on cosmic adventures, through parallel universes and time and everything else. There's a certain genre, that whole sort of Fantastic Four / Doctor Who genre, because those two things kind of meet in the middle because it's all about imagination and you can go anywhere. So this was a chance to really do that kind of story with a bunch of original characters. And Mike just did such a beautiful job on the art. So that's out there too. And the final thing I'll plug is Dark Horse did a beautiful, beautiful hardcover collection of Moonshadow, which is, if I was going to pick the 2 or 3 best things I've ever done in my career, Moonshadow is one of them. And this is Moonshadow, the definitive edition. It's got the original 12-issue series. It's got the sequel that we did for Vertigo. I went through my files. I found all my original notes and handwritten, scrawled notes about it. And John J. Muth, the artist, found original sketches. So it's a beautiful, beautiful package and a beautiful presentation of a story that, like I said, is one of my favorite things that I've ever done and something I'm very proud of. So those are the plugs for today. And hopefully we can talk some months down the line and I can tell you about these other things and we'll be in a much safer, healthier world. It's the other thing I think about, I had all these conventions lined up for this year, and they're all gone. They're all gone, and so even just doing these podcasts is it's an important thing because it maintains that connection with people. I enjoy the conventions. I enjoy sitting there talking to people that, how could you not enjoy talking to people that enjoy your work? The people that hate your work don't come over your table, They don't go up and go, well, I really hate your stories. The people that come over are people that read and appreciate the work, and I appreciate them. So it's really a joyful thing to sit and talk to people. So anything, that's why I enjoy social media, because it allows that connection to stay alive. And I think right now, just in general, as human beings, we're all craving connection right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm very happy to talk to you guys.
Oh yeah, anytime, especially this year. If you want to come on and plug, just let me know. You have my email. But yes. Like I said, anytime you want to promote, just let me know. I love picking your brain. People go. I mean, he has all this new stuff coming out, all his classic stuff. You could basically find any Marvel, whoever your favorite Marvel or DC character is, he's probably written them.
The fun thing I always say is, especially with DC, because I've done so much of the animated work as well, between the comics and the animated work, I think I've had a chance to write almost every single character in some form. When I wrote for Justice League Unlimited, there were always 1,000 different characters showing up. I think the second episode they gave me had almost everybody in it. So it's been great to kind of have a chance in some way, shape, or form to write almost all these characters. I can't complain about my career. Being a freelancer is not always easy. It has its ups and downs. But when I look over the entire arc of a career, I'm very grateful.
Has there ever been any talk of maybe doing any animated work on your classic Justice League International run or anything?
I wrote a lot for the Batman Brave and the Bold TV series, which was a really fun show to work for because it had a different tone than the Batman that we're used to.
Yeah.
And I did a few episodes that involved JLI, and there was talk right as Batman Brave and the Bold was wrapping up that they were going to transition to a JLI series right out of Brave and the Bold. And that would have been great. That would have been so much fun. I'm not privy to the high levels of decision making, so I don't know why that idea was abandoned. But yeah, I think a JLI animated movie would be great, or when we did it formerly known as the Justice League when they became the Super Buddies, if they don't want to use the Justice League name, same batch of crazy characters. I think a big adventure like that with a lot of character-based humor would make for a great animated film. I think Speeding Bullets would be a great animated film.
Oh yeah, if they're doing Red Sun, do Speeding Bullets.
I think Speeding Bullets is kind of a no-brainer. Superman is Batman. What more do you need?
And you could even package it as a set: Red Sun and Speeding Bullets.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. So we'll see. You never know, because every time they call me up with a new movie, I'm always surprised by what it's going to be. And the one I'm working on right now, which I can't tell you about, will be the last thing you could possibly expect. That's all I can say.
Oh, really?
Ambush Bug it is.
Ambush Bug.
Hey,
Charlie too.
I know. I'm a big Ambush Bug fan too. So,
all right. Well, it's a pleasure talking to you guys. Everybody, all three of you, stay safe and healthy.
You too,
and,
sir.
You as well.
And hopefully, the next time we talk, we'll be in a safer and better world.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
A pleasure. You all take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, see.
Another excellent interview, Philip.
Oh, I think Charlie has to take a lot of the credit for this one.
I helped. Yes. Well, I wouldn't say
Hell.
I helped. I know.
Yeah, although I didn't
meant
force myself
overall.
by not having. I have to read the Howard books, and now, once I have,
I just can't believe you've never read the Howard books. I was
read
shook.
so few books. I read comic books because I'm illiterate. Werther's right. No, it's like literally I have read like 6 books cover to cover. One was a Stephen King book, so you got to give me that.
So that was yes.
That's surprising. I would have pegged you as a very learned, read man.
No, I don't read very quickly.
So?
Which is probably why I like comic books, because they got pretty pictures. It's like super mild dyslexia, or whatever it is, or just I don't read fast. Like I narrate all the words as I'm reading, so it takes me as long to read a book as it would be to read a book aloud, which takes a long time. And so I don't.
Get Charlie Audible for his birthday.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder if any of those. That's what I was going to say. Is the Howard stuff audio? And are there any audio books? Because I know you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, there's. Well, I mean, I listen to some podcasts, but I mostly watch TV. Yes.
Well,
and now that I don't like,
you're not traveling to work.
Like when I took subways, I listened to a lot more.
Yeah, I heard podcasts are actually down by like 20-25% because people are creatures of habit. They don't realize, hey, I can still listen to my podcast even though I'm not commuting to work.
Yeah, I can see that because I would listen to most of mine. I listen to and from work and actually at work. So like if I was stuck at home, I don't know, my podcast listening would probably go way down.
That's weird. I like to relax at home with my podcast. I do. I like to blast my music on the way to work.
Yeah, it's different ways to approach it. But yeah, I mean, and I sometimes do. I listen to podcasts at work, and that's also weird because now that I'm not at home or not at work, because we always have to keep the TV on, otherwise it doesn't turn back on. It's got a very bad TV. So, there's always that distraction there. And then just having the podcast on would be even more of a distraction while I'm trying to do the work. So it's 6 a.m.
It's a thing.
It's a thing, and I got to get back to it. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, I actually enjoy reading when I read. I really love to. I get very sucked into books, so I do get lost in them. And but I just, I've read The Vampire Lestat, I've read Time Machine, 1984, Brave New World. I've read a few.
Congratulations, you're at that graph of everything. So
yeah, well, I read a lot of stuff when I was in high school, and really since high school, I have not read. High school and college was when I really read a lot of novels. That's when I read most of my, the Star Trek novels that I really enjoyed and loved dearly. But then something about, I guess turning 20.
Pay bills and be an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a teenager, I read a ton. But yeah, it's just I don't have time to read all these books now.
Yeah, exactly, And, but yeah, I should, because I do love Conan so much, I should read the original Howards because, that's where it's based off of, you know.
But yeah, the interview was great. But Lilith Hellfire, if you're going to sit there and look pretty, you better turn that camera on.
You guys are just handling it so well. I'm proud of you boys.
Yeah, well,
Not that you don't handle every interview well, but she had some very thoughtful and thought-provoking questions. And I didn't want to break up the flow of the conversation. So.
she didn't actually watch the movie.
No, I did. I did. My biggest, I just had, I couldn't get past the Wonder Woman thing, so that's why I just let you guys talk. I couldn't get past it.
What?
Oh, really? I kind of liked his Wonder Woman take.
I come from an island of women, get it? Is that what it...
Yeah, it's just they changed that relationship so fundamentally from the actual original story that which I enjoyed that, actually. The only time that I actually enjoyed.
I mean, I kind of get it. I mean, you read the book and it's just it seems like Lois and Wonder Woman, these women are just fawning over him, and they took that out of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, I did like
reason.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, it wasn't so much that she wasn't into the idea; it's that she didn't. It was kind of a ham-handed come on. And that's when she shuts him down, and then almost immediately she says, "Well, hey, what's wrong with distractions?" Suggesting, she understands it in principle, but
And also, I kind of just wanted to talk about the cast more. I thought it was very interesting that they cast Diedrich Bader, who usually voices Batman, as Lex Luthor, and then they give us, the Harry Potter villain of Jason Isaacs as, the Red Sun Superman. So, and then they also had Amy Acker as Wonder Woman. It was just a lot of things that they were definitely doing in the voice casting that kind of set the story apart as well. So,
and I'm going to say right now, I love Diedrich Bader because he really humanized Lex in that. And this is
he
where
used to play Batman.
Yeah, but it's sort of where
he played from that Brave and the Bold, so it's just I get it.
It's kind of where now I'm thinking, who would make a great Reed Richards is Diedrich Bader. You know
what? Honestly, you're right. I won't even argue that one.
Yeah, you see, I watch my Modern Housewife. He's actually, so he can play an oblivious intellectual very well. He's a college professor on Modern Housewife.
Well, I would argue that his character on the Drew Carey show could have been as well.
Well, but a genius or an intellectual in that? I guess, I always saw...
If you would ever stop drinking. It's the Homer thing. If you would ever just stop drinking.
Yes, loved him on the Drew Carey. Loved everyone on the Drew Carey show. That was a really great show. But Diedrich Bader's just amazing in it, and I'd love to see more of Diedrich Bader. I mean, I've been a fan of him for years, so I loved his Lex Luthor in this. Again, because he really humanizes him and does not come off as per se evil. He really comes off as a guy who, without a Superman to be his rival, might dedicate himself to more positive outcomes for the world, even if it is still just to beat him, even if it is still just to win the argument. And I like that. Yeah,
I think his Lex came off more sympathetic than the one from the book. Yeah.
Well, you still have that Lex at that time period, kind of. Still circling, swirling in your head where, they kind of, when you modernize and update it, it kind of gives you a chance to kind of cut a little bit of those ties, I think, as well, too.
Mm.
So. Also, he never had Superboy blow chemicals in his face, turning him evil. It's all a tragic accident.
Let it go. Let it go.
I'm just saying. That's the true origin. Those luscious red locks drove him mad.
I think Charlie's into the double L's.
All my favorite characters are truly gingers. Darn it. It's true. I am a Wolverine level ginger file. This is bad.
Yeah, bub.
There you go. Yeah. Well.
Came from Canada.
Yes. Yeah.
On that note.
Yeah, I was going to say.
On that.
Should we get out of here?
So let's get out of here. Let's give our plugs.
All right. So, everyone, remember, hey, Especially if you're a comics creator, get a hold of me. Just like Mr. Dematteis said, there's no cons going on right now. So if you like to plug anything, even though nothing's coming out, or just shoot the breeze with us, email us, capesandlunatics@gmail.com. Call the voicemail, 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And remember to follow us on all the social medias. You can find it all in one convenient place. That's Linktree, linktr.ee/capesandlunatics. And remember to support the sponsors, Tweaked Audio, Hunt a Killer, Pod Life the Book, now in digital and paperback. And hey, when you're buying all of your, well, probably almost all of your needs right now, and you go on Amazon, use the Southgate Media Group link right down there in the show notes to help bring you such fine quality programming as Capes and Lunatics. And hey, help out Master Doom Rob Southgate.
Go back and look at my history, and you will find out I am right so much more often than I'm wrong.
Hey, man, I'm getting him back for years of Gotham abuse. Anyway. Lilith Hellfire.
Oh, if you nerds want to hang out with me on the interwebs, feel free to find me via Twitter @Lilith Hellfire or on Instagram @Lilith Hellfire69. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
And women.
So true.
Yes. Just like Batman.
Charles Esser.
If you'd like to write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our Maz and Paz once did, do so at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter as I live tweet things like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the last broadcast show out there. At Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality.
Bing!
Thank you, Maz.
And pause.
Tristan wants a shackle.
I know, man. I'm going to say Tristan Esser, check. Anyway.
Now you can pop the popcorn.
Thank you, Mr. Jan Dematteis. And for another week, we have been your Capes.
Ampersand.
Lunatics.
Yay. Hi, Tristan. But your dad blurred the background, so...
I want you to see my crazy looking.
Charlie's like, only see me.
I just thought that I could do that. Testing it out.
Yeah. Oh, I love that now that we've gone to your Capes and Lunatics, Lilith, Ray stole for his Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. And there's your plug, Ray. Thank you, comrades.